The storm didn't move around him. It split. Not gradually, not naturally. One moment, Ethan Cole's boat was being swallowed by walls of water, waves rising like mountains on all sides. The next, there was a path. A stretch of water, unnaturally calm, cutting through chaos like an invisible hand had drawn a line across the sea. Ethan would later say it wasn't the calm that terrified him. It was what came just before it. Because moments earlier, when the waves were crashing and the sky had gone black, he had dropped to his knees on the deck of his boat and whispered something he hadn't said in years. "Please, I can't do this alone." And then, the wind changed. Not weakened, changed, as if it had been redirected. And before the night was over, what happened on that open water would leave even seasoned rescue crews searching for an explanation. But to understand how Ethan Cole found himself kneeling in the middle of a storm that should have taken his life, we have to go back to a decision he almost didn't make. The morning had started quietly. Too quietly. Ethan stood on the dock, hands resting on the edge of his boat, staring out at the horizon. The water was calm, flat, almost unnaturally so. Behind him, Lena's voice broke the silence. "You don't have to go today." He didn't turn around. "We need the catch." Her footsteps came closer. "The forecast changed overnight." "I've seen worse." That wasn't entirely true, but pride had a way of rewriting memory. For months, things had been slipping. Fewer fish, rising costs, repairs that couldn't wait. The kind of slow, grinding pressure that doesn't explode, but wears you down piece by piece. This trip mattered, more than he wanted to admit. Marcus Hale approached from the neighboring dock, shaking his head. "You're still heading out?" Ethan gave a short nod. Marcus glanced at the sky. "Storm system's moving faster than they predicted." Ethan finally turned. "I'll be in and out." Marcus didn't argue further, but the look he gave him lingered. That was the first moment something didn't feel right. The second came just minutes later. As Ethan stepped onto the boat, one of the ropes slipped from his grip, something that never happened. It dropped into the water with a quiet splash. He paused, just for a second, then shook it off. By the time the engine roared to life and the shoreline began to shrink behind him, the unease had already begun to settle in. And still, he kept going. Because turning back felt like failure. And sometimes, that's how storms begin. By midday, the ocean had changed. Not dramatically, but enough. The wind picked up first, sharp, cutting across the surface in uneven bursts, the kind that makes experienced fishermen pause, even if they don't admit it out loud. Ethan adjusted his course, checked his equipment. Everything still worked. Everything looked fine. But the radio crackled, static, then silence. He tapped it. Nothing. That was the third sign. Then the birds disappeared. Seagulls that had followed him for miles suddenly vanished, as if something had pushed them away. Ethan noticed. Of course he noticed. But again, he kept going. Because by then he had already come too far, and turning back would mean returning with nothing. The sky darkened slowly, like ink spreading through water. Then faster. The horizon blurred. Wind became force, and waves began to rise. Not gentle swells, but steep, unpredictable walls. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. "This isn't right," he muttered. The first real wave hit minutes later. It slammed against the side of the boat, sending a burst of cold water across the deck. Then another, and another. Within minutes, the sea turned violent, the kind of violent that strips away confidence, that replaces control with survival. Ethan reached for the radio again, still dead. That's when the first real thought crossed his mind. I shouldn't have come out here. And with that realization, the storm fully arrived. The storm didn't build. It exploded. Wind howled across the water with a force that felt alive, like it had intention. Waves rose faster than the boat could adjust, crashing down with violent precision. Ethan fought the wheel, muscles straining, every movement reactive. No rhythm, no pattern, just chaos. Water flooded across the deck. The engine groaned under pressure. Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the ocean in brief, blinding flashes, each one revealing just how small he was in the middle of it all. "Come on, come on," he muttered. But there was no answering voice, no signal, no direction, just the storm. Another wave hit, harder than the rest. The boat tilted sharply. For a moment, it felt like it might not come back down. Ethan braced himself, and then it did. Barely. He stumbled, catching himself against the railing. His breath came fast now, sharp, uneven, the kind of breathing that comes when fear finally breaks through. Because this wasn't just a storm anymore. This was something he couldn't outmaneuver. Another crash, another surge. The engine sputtered. Ethan froze. "No!" He tried again. The engine struggled, then caught, but weaker. Much weaker. And that's when he realized something else. He was drifting. Not steering, drifting. And wherever the storm wanted to take him, it would. That's when the final piece of control slipped away. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole had nothing left to rely on, except something he wasn't sure he still believed in. He didn't plan to pray. It wasn't something Ethan did anymore, not since things had started falling apart. Not since the quiet disappointments had stacked into something heavier. But standing there, alone, soaked, shaking, with nothing left to control, something broke. Another wave crashed. The boat lurched violently. Ethan dropped to his knees, not out of strength, out of surrender. Rain poured over him as he gripped the edge of the deck. His voice came out rough, uncertain. "Please." The word felt unfamiliar, small, but it was all he had. "I can't do this alone." Lightning cracked overhead. For a moment, the world froze in white light, then darkness again. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he meant it. Not the words, the surrender behind them, the admission, the letting go. And that's when something changed. Not outside, not yet. Inside. A stillness. A strange, quiet calm that didn't belong in the middle of a storm. Ethan opened his eyes. The waves were still rising, the wind still screaming. But something shifted. And then the wind turned. At first, it didn't make sense. The wind didn't fade. It redirected. Instead of hitting him head-on, it began pushing sideways, unnaturally steady, as if guided. The waves followed, not disappearing, but shifting, opening. Ethan blinked, trying to understand what he was seeing, because directly ahead of him, there was space. A stretch of water that wasn't rising or crashing, calm. Impossible calm. Surrounded on both sides by towering waves. He didn't move at first. Couldn't. Then instinct took over. He grabbed the wheel, adjusted the boat, and slowly, carefully steered into that opening. The engine, weak just moments ago, steadied. The boat moved forward. And the storm stayed on either side, like walls, like something was holding it back. Ethan's heart pounded, not from fear now, but from something else, something he couldn't name. He looked up. The clouds above that narrow path had begun to break, just enough to let light through. Not bright, but present, guiding. He didn't speak, didn't question. He just followed. And for the next several minutes, that path remained. Long enough. Just long enough. By the time the storm began to collapse behind him, Ethan could see it. The shoreline. Faint, but real. And then, a second miracle. A rescue vessel cutting through the remaining waves. Marcus stood at the front, eyes wide. "You're alive?" Ethan didn't answer right away, because he wasn't looking at Marcus. He was looking back, at the ocean behind him. The storm still raged, violent, unforgiving, untouched. Except for one thing. A narrow, fading stretch of calm water, exactly where he had come through. Marcus followed his gaze. What is that?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "I don't know." But deep down, he did. Some people will say it was coincidence, a rare shift in wind patterns, an unusual break in the storm, and maybe that's enough for them. But Ethan Cole never explained it that way, because he remembers something deeper than what happened around him. He remembers what happened inside him. The moment he stopped fighting everything on his own. The moment he admitted he couldn't carry it anymore. The moment he let go and asked for help. And then somehow the storm didn't disappear. It made a way. The truth is, not all storms in life simply go away. Some of them rage longer than we expect. Some of them take more out of us than we think we can handle. Some feel strong enough to break us completely. But sometimes, the miracle isn't the storm ending. It's finding a path through it. A way forward when there shouldn't be one. A quiet strength when you've run out of your own. A moment of guidance that carries you through even if you come out the other side shaken. But still standing. Still here. If this story spoke to you, take a moment to like, share, and follow Lanes and Lanterns for more stories of faith, timing, and unseen guidance. And tell us in the comments, have you ever gone through a storm in your life that you somehow made it through even when you didn't think you would?